Maryland. The second reality is that Pimlico is and has been for a long time a substandard facility. It's just not really worthy from a facility perspective of an event like the Preakness. So there's been talk for years and years and years about either tearing down Pimlico and rebuilding it on site, or moving it to a more palatable location, picking up the Preakness, moving it to Laurel, which is in a bit of a better area, remodeling Laurel, which I think they've done or they're in the process of doing. So there are a lot of options there. But Nestor, I found an article in a newspaper that said that Pimlico was in a hopeless state of disrepair, that it was beyond repair, that the Preakness needed to be moved to Laurel and Pimlico needed to be torn down. Nestor, that was 1948.
48. I was going to say 78, but that's as long as I've been around, you know.
Yeah, that's how long this has been talked about. So don't be surprised if the Preakness is moved from Pimlico to Laurel within the next 5 years, let's say. But it'll stay in Maryland.
Well, and that's going to be a Baltimore versus the rest of the state kind of thing. But y'all get together and you come in here, and every time I talk to a Pletcher or a Baffert or a D. Wayne or any of the people that are on the circuit that make this trip in here and live here for 4 days, 6 days, 8 days, however long their horse ships, this apparently is the quaint version, right? Like, I've been to the Belmont a half dozen times. I've been to the Derby more than a half dozen times. In New York, it kind of can get swallowed up, especially if there's not a Triple Crown winner. I've been up there on weekends when there's been prize fights, baseball games, Stanley Cup playoff games, NBA. All of that happens in New York. But for Baltimore, the world kind of stops here for a week. And I think the world of horse racing stops because there is this afterglow of having the Derby champion. I mean, everybody would always say to me when I was a kid, the Preakness has the one thing in the world nobody else has. It has the Derby winner. And until that changes, and this time around, there's... this horse is considered to be unbeatable in this race this week, right?
Well, he should know. No. I mean, some people might consider him unbeatable, but he shouldn't be considered unbeatable. There was no doubt that his Kentucky Derby win was pretty phenomenal. I mean, when you have a horse that can outrun most of the other speed horses to the front and then finish faster than the closers, that's a pretty good recipe for a victory, and that's exactly what he did in the Kentucky Derby. But if there's one thing that veteran horse players and handicappers have learned should be taken as the gospel over the years, it's that you can never make declarations and you can never reach a absolute ironclad conclusion about a horse or a race that was run on a sloppy track. It just throws monkey wrenches into so many different handicapping variables that you have to consider that to be almost at face value a little bit of an anomaly. Now, Always Dreaming was the favorite. He ran like the favorite. He had good form before the Kentucky Derby. But I think a lot of people are looking at that Derby and they're saying, yeah, he deserves to be the favorite in the Preakness. He may win the Preakness, but we can't necessarily look at that race and say, he's that much better than the other horses.
What did you like about the the Derby race in the mud? What about the mud makes Always Dreaming a better story at this point?
Well, his running style was tailor-made for the racetrack at Churchill Downs. He's a horse that wants to be up near the front. Therefore, if you look at the photos, and we're going to show this on NBC during our Preakness coverage, John Velasquez and the horse immediately after the race, they look completely pristine. Not a speck of mud on them anywhere. And you look at the runner-up, looking at Lee, or you look at Julian Leperoux, who rode Classic Empire, they're literally covered in mud. It's like they just dove headfirst into the racetrack. And that's the difference with a horse that has tactical speed like Always Dreaming does. And a lot of the horses back in the pack in the Derby were taking so much mud to their faces that their jockeys were having to steer them outside to try to get out of the spray because their horses didn't like. I mean, no one's going to like getting a mud shower. But what that does is that causes them to lose more ground because they're racing outside. Always Dreaming was on the rail all the way around. on both turns. So he had a lot of built-in advantages because of his running style and the racetrack surface that he won't necessarily have on Saturday in Baltimore, unless we get another sloppy track.
We are chatting with Randy Moss, horse racing insider, as well as at NFL Network. He's coming in with the NBC Sports crew for all things Preakness 142 on Saturday out at Old Hilltop. You can follow him out on Twitter at Randy_Moss_TV as well. Randy, I'm going to get some football in here before it's all. I'm not going to let you come to Baltimore and not talk some football, but I got to stay on the racing thing. Baffert, missing in action this time around. And I guess it really does go to show that bad luck. He had a great horse 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, believed he would be here. It really does lack something when the superstars don't come out. It's kind of like having football playoffs without the Patriots. You got to have somebody in there, and in the case of Baffert, it does feel like he's missing a little bit here this year.
That's a really good analogy. The playoffs without the Patriots and the Triple Crown.
But I root for Baffert. I want to make that clear. I mean, I don't root the Patriots. I never root for the Patriots. I'll make that clear.
Exactly. I was just going to say, I don't think anyone's going to compare Bob Baffert with Bill Belichick, but he had a horse in Mastery that was going to be it looked like he was going to be a pretty heavy Kentucky Derby favorite if he had continued on the track that he was on. Now, whether he would have beaten Always Dreaming the way Always Dreaming ran is highly debatable. But Baffert had the misfortune of having the horse suffer a career-ending injury way back in March. And he had a couple of backups that were in the pipeline that just didn't really pan out. So, it's pretty disappointing that we don't have Baffert here to give us all his wisecracks and his irreverent humor.
Well, and then Royal Mo, so. I mean, these horses are fragile creatures like all the rest of us, right? I mean, that was another horse that was going to give Always Dreaming a run this week, right?
Royal Mo was a horse that he ran in the Santa Anita Derby. He didn't win it. But he ran a very good race in defeat, and so we were looking forward to seeing Royal Mo run in the Preakness. He didn't have enough points in the new point system to get into the Kentucky Derby. He was on the outside looking in, but that honestly might have been a blessing in disguise. He would have come into the Preakness exceptionally fresh, but he injured himself in a workout a few days ago, had to have surgery, career-ending injury. He'll make it okay as far as a stud career goes, but no Royal Mo. Disappointing.
The rest of this field and who's going to chase down Always Dreaming, some thoughts about Looking at Lee, some thoughts about a Classic Empire, some other horses that showed nicely in the Derby, but to your point, with the mud out, we're hoping for better weather conditions. I think we're going to get better weather this week.
Looking at Lee had a beautiful trip in the Derby to finish second. Like Always Dreaming, he hugged the rail all the way around. He's the kind of horse it's a veteran horse, a lot of experience. The mud in the face didn't bother him at all. He's a very determined horse, so he runs right through it. And it's doubtful he's going to get the same kind of beautiful trip in the Preakness that he got in the Derby. The horse really to watch in terms of the showdown with Always Dreaming is Classic Empire. I mean, he finished fourth in the Kentucky Derby and had an absolutely nightmarish trip, especially in comparison to a horse like Looking at Lee. First of all, Classic Empire is the kind of horse that wants to be up in the mix early. He should have been pretty close to Always Dreaming, tracking him early. Instead, he was broadsided leaving the starting gate, almost knocked down, and that forced him way back to 10th or 11th place early. So he was put in a position that he's not really accustomed to being in early in the race. He was taking all the mud in his face. He was steered to the outside to try to get out of the mud. He still made a nice move to finish fourth. And if you look at the ground loss on the turns, he ran about 6 or 6.5 lengths farther than Always Dreaming did during the race, and yet he was only beaten a little less than 8 lengths. So he gets a better trip in the Preakness, maybe saves a little ground, is right up there close to Always Dreaming early. Classic Empire, who was the 2-year-old champion last year, has a great chance to turn the tables in the Preakness.
Randy, I always love watching NBC's coverage on Oaks Day and Derby. I do. As a guy that swoops into this thing once a year, which, I'm going to be honest, Randy, I sit here, I talk sports for a living. I've done it for a quarter of a century. We talk horse racing around here for a week or two a year. And maybe that's shame on the Maryland Jockey Club. Maybe that's shame on me or shame on the audience. I don't know. But when this race comes around, the biggest thing I could do to get ready for the Preakness is watch your coverage for 3 or 4 hours on Derby Day, because I mean, all the connections, all the stories, all the background, the stories that make you laugh and cry, the humanity of all of it. But, it really does fall upon you guys as the storytellers. Whereas we sit here and talk, NFL, everybody knows that Bill Belichick's the coach of the Patriots, or knows about Tom Brady, or knows about John Harbaugh or Joe Flacco. But when the racing thing happens, there's so many people, 99% of the audience, are waiting to get the story, and you guys come here and try to tell this story. As a scene setter, what is the story this week? Is it Pletcher? Is it Velasquez? Is it Always Dreaming? Is it the racetrack and Preakness? I mean, the one story's always been, we're looking for a Triple Crown winner. That went on all of my life, right, from the late 70s until 2 years ago. Now that story's been written as well. What is the story this week?
Well, I don't know if there's any one single overriding story in the Preakness that is any different than the ones that you just mentioned. I mean, the old Chick Lang line, the late Chick Lang who ran Pimlico for so long that you just quoted. You mean the Preakness has one thing the Derby never has, and that's the Derby winner. So that's always going to be the focus of the Preakness and his chances of sweeping the Triple Crown. Classic Empire and the trip that he got in the Kentucky Derby is also going to be a pretty high profile story. You've still got some of the storylines in the Kentucky Derby that are now coming back in the Preakness. Antonio Sano, the trainer of Gunnevera, who was kidnapped a couple of times in his native Venezuela. That's a fantastic story. We'll supplement that with some of the newcomers into the Preakness field, but it's just really the Preakness is unique in that the Baltimore angle, the second leg of the Triple Crown angle, it just has always so many compelling details to it that we never have any problem coming up with some good storylines for Baltimore. And thanks for the compliments about the NBC coverage. The one thing that the brass at NBC Sports, Sam Flood, Rob Hyland, our producer, really hits hard every year for the Derby is that most of the people that watch are just like you. They don't know the storylines. They don't know the horses. You also have a higher percentage of female viewership for the Kentucky Derby than any other sporting event other than the Olympics in the United States. And so we try to do a lot of fashion and society. Not that that's all women are interested in, but it's an all-encompassing kind of telecast. And the ratings show that they've hit really the right kind of mix there.
Well, I always try to dress nice, Randy, and anybody dropping a Chicky Lang a reference in here is all right by me. All right, let's get off
Love Chicky and Chick Jr. Love them both.
Last time I think you came in here was football related, and the Ravens, and maybe some thoughts about the Ravens here in their off season. We're always tossing and turning it around as to how they're going to get better, and certainly through the draft they did not draft offense. That has everyone around here a little squeamish, I think.
Well, as long as you got Ozzie Newsome, John Harbaugh in the mix, I think the Ravens are always going to be contenders in the AFC North. It's a division that's winnable. I mean, the Steelers, obviously, the Bengals will probably bounce back a little bit, but the Ravens, it's year in and year out. I mean, they're always in the mix. And I know that sometimes there's a lot of hand-wringing up there about, this doesn't look good, they didn't draft right, free agents say they weren't as active as we wanted. But then the dust settles, and the Ravens are seemingly almost always in the mix. What a really wonderfully run organization.
Hey, man, you have a great trip in here. Don't eat any tourist crab cakes this week. We'll make sure we feed you right and treat you right around here. Welcome back to Baltimore. Settle in for Preakness 142. It's always nice to visit with you, Randy.
Likewise, Nestor. Looking forward to it. Take care.
You got it, Randy Moss, NBC, as well as the NFL Network. He is in for Preakness 142, and the whole list of contenders here, Always Dreaming, Classic Empire, Looking at Lee, Gunnevera, Conquest Mo Money. That's Arkansas Derby second finisher there. Cloud Computing, Multiplier, Senior Investment, Term of Art. I kind of like Term of Art because maybe a little Art Modell reference there as well. Doug O'Neill and Jose Ortiz there. You can find me anywhere the internet is served out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. It's still $10 a month. Get yourself in shape. We got the 90-degree weather rolling in here. Any breaking news happens first on our WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. About 10,000 of you on our text service waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next Oriole call up from Norfolk. I'm sure Luke will keep you pretty active there. Dennis Colatzos will also be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, getting you ready for the Preakness and the weekend. Got the Orioles in Detroit, home against Toronto all weekend. And, of course, the Capitals and Wizards elimination now has put my eyes even more focused on baseball as well as on the Ravens as we get ready for mini camps here. And Joe Flacco slinging it around, as he likes to say. Nasty at WNST.net finds me Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live everywhere in the world. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.